The world. All the time in the world. Electron scanning located the object deep beneath the proposed new site of the new mall before construction began. All land recovered from flood or drought to a reusable standard had first to be inspected for buried treasure by qualified archaeologists. As in most cases, their scans of the earth beneath the site today were able to identify potentially a warehouse load of artificial items from decades and centuries ago. But the experts looking at their screens filtered most of them from their search. They were scanning for very particular elements that suggested very particular artifacts. Any such artifacts had then to be evaluated by the chief archaeologist and possibly excavated before the builders were permitted to break ground. The whole process was a costly but strategic delay in a very long-term financial game. The chief archaeologist, a young woman sent up by the national authorities, brought in an outsourced team she trusted to analyse all the targeted artefacts quickly and efficiently. It was their scientific duty to unearth and remove as much as possible of any digital value to the depth required by law. This depth was regarded internationally as the agreed stratum limit of the digital era. Anything deeper, from before the dawn of the microchip, was left to future historians with more time, more funding, more advanced technology, and a different set of interests. Through the work of archaeologists down the centuries, the past buried in the earth had always been a rich source of inferred information. Remnants of architecture fed into guesswork about the engineering methods of ancient cultures. Fragments of statuary, tools, and crockery fired our imaginations about their religious customs and daily practices. Historians took the evidence and constructed their best models about how the world must have been. But today's archaeologists were only interested in unearthing recorded information, stored in the microchips of trashed hard drives, mobile phones, lost AI tech, and other long-distance devices which science now had the tools to restore. The historians no longer needed to infer the secrets of the past. They could directly retrieve them. But there was a commercial constraint. The information recovered was not for general public consumption, at least not yet. Instead, it was inputted into a transglobal corporate project that was the holy grail of virtual reality, and, once fully constructed, would control not just humanity's future, but its past as well. A reconstructed virtual history, going all the way back to the 20th century, the modern world's first ever simulacrum of itself, a way for anyone to travel back in time at the drop of a credit check. Dr. Grady never gave her first name to the Mal architects already on site with whom she had to liaise. "Call me Grady," was all she said, and none of them overheard any of her own team address her by any other name or term. "Grady, I've got those stats ready. Grady, take a look at this. Something interesting in Sector K, Grady." It was all business with her. Without seeming detached, Grady remained certainly impersonal throughout the dig. Whether squinting at diagrams on a screen or getting dirt under her fingernails, her focus on the work was mechanistic and obsessive throughout, to the point where the construction people wondered if she was as human as she really looked. The depth of the interesting object in Sector K suggested it dated back to the turn of the present millennium. The complete scan initially depicted a chaotic 3D mosaic of thousands of bits and pieces of detritus, abandoned layer upon layer through the ages within the footprint of the proposed new build. Once the correct filter was applied, Most of them were removed from the image, leaving still dozens of candidates for excavation on the screen. And this was only Sector K she was looking at. It was going to be a long dig, but potentially a fruitful one. One of the elements they were tracking for, gold, had been detected inside the object currently under discussion. The interesting thing about this is that it's buried inside a stainless steel container, and if you look at the striation patterns in the dirt around it, it looks like it was placed there deliberately, said the analyst over Grady's shoulder, leaving her to draw the obvious conclusion. Is it a capsule, she said, looking up from the screen. We'll know if we bring it up. Grady wasted no time deciding. Add it to the list. The next stage, the digging and recovery of each targeted object, was a slow process. The team initially worked with the site manually to a depth of 2 meters, laboring the old-fashioned way, hunched in the dirt with trowels and brushes. During this phase, the team carefully unearthed and removed all items of potential academic or commercial value. The work took a full month and gave Grady that loamy whiff of proper archaeology that she secretly loved. While beyond the tape, the architects watched and waited and tinkered with their schematics. Construction would wait as long as required for Grady's go-ahead, but she knew that there was a statutory time limit on the delay that even her authority could not overstretch. The next stage of the dig was much shorter, just a few days, as the needle-nosed robotic arm drilled deep into the earth for the rest of the targeted items on the list. The true archaeologist in Grady hated this, as the arm ground its way through who knew what lost treasures of the past towards its programmed objectives, and she often thought about all the things that might and that might not remain to those far future historians, if any were left, in a time ahead when the as yet unbuilt Mall would be long gone. When the arm brought up the object in Sector K, Grady had it sent straight to the lab where it could be investigated under appropriate conditions. She oversaw the job herself, working alongside 2 of her best analysts. What they were looking at was a snub-nosed, bullet-shaped canister, some 20 centimeters in height and 7 in diameter. A check of the database confirmed it to be a vacuum flask of late 20th century manufacture. Open it, Grady said. After centuries in compacted ground, the flask would take some force to open. The operation was done remotely in an incubation pod, against risk of contamination. The cap shrieked as the robotic arm unscrewed it, then tipped out the contents gently onto the floor of the clinically sterile chamber. Grady was looking at a yellowed sheet of stationery paper, a pale square of photographic paper, 2 gold rings, and 2 locks of human hair, one a virulent black, the other withered and grey. Nothing digital, said one of the analysts. No matter, said Grady. Gather up the items and store them in isolation for now. Scan those papers first and send them to my screen as soon as the results come through. Grady waited in her site office for the information to arrive from the lab, pacing the small space, deep in thought. Time capsules, products of a fad from the age of television, were numerous, but still rare, and had been known to open up new areas of knowledge about the past, knowledge sometimes useful to the architects of the simulacrum. Illustrious careers had been built on their discovery. Whatever she found on that paper could prove to be her route into pure academia. Grady was mentally listing the living luminaries in her field and various chairs they occupied in prestigious institutes across the globe and beyond, when the data package pinged up 10 minutes later. Grady took a deep breath, sat down calmly at her desk, and opened the files. The first text was a handwritten letter. a message in a bottle that had sailed all the way from the distant past to the distant future. To whoever might find this was my son David's idea. You see, when my husband Frank and I first wed, we thought we had all the time in the world together. But Frank was a soldier, and he went and died young, long before his time, killed in a war he didn't even support. That was many years ago, and all I have left of him now, apart from photos and memories, are his wedding ring and lock of his hair. I never remarried. Frank was the love of my life, except I've had to live most of it without him. I don't believe in God or any kind of afterlife, so I never thought Frank and I could ever be reunited until David told me about DNA. He said that in the future they might be able to clone people back to life, and that the clones might even retain memories from their former lives. If you're reading this, I don't know whether that's true or not, but if it is, I wonder if you could find it in your heart to bring me and my Frank back together again, so that perhaps we can have the precious time that was taken from us. Yours, in hope and faith, Mrs. Caroline Williams. Grady examined the photograph. Time had faded it beyond any unaided distinction, but the centuries of darkness had kept the ghost of light alive, and the guys in the lab had managed to recapture a milky image of a handsome young couple, smiling for the camera, arm in arm, at the seaside of a coastline that no longer existed. The seaside. A needle of nostalgia pinned down a butterfly of memory in Grady's head. In the photograph, the boy's black hair and the girl's blonde hair fluttered in the sea breeze. They looked windswept and happy and in love. It was hardly going to add anything to her academic credence, but Grady was touched. As she looked at the girl in the photo, she pictured a veined, twisted, shaky hand taking scissors to a thin white wisp and placing it next to Frank's hair inside the flask. After several minutes more, she contacted the lab. Were any contaminants found on the objects from Sector K? Negative, her colleague said. Grady kept him hanging on in silence while she studied the photograph for another moment. Okay, prep those locks of hair for removal to the biolab. In fact, send them the rings and the letter and the picture as well. Tell them, for what it's worth, I'm recommending these two for culture and rehabilitation. I'll get right on it, Grady, the analyst at the lab said.